Hi, I'm Scott Berry. I'm broker associate with Janet Berry's luxury home team at Premier Plus Realty in beautiful Naples, Florida. I'm here today to talk about one of the questions we hear most often, especially this time of year, and that is, what if you're buying or selling a home in Southwest Florida and a hurricane is on the way? What do you do and how do you protect yourself? We have those answers coming right up. We get questions all the time about how weather can affect a real estate transaction in Southwest Florida, and more specifically, when you're buying or selling a home in Naples or Southwest Florida, what can you do to make sure that you, your money, and your home are protected in the event of a hurricane? Oh, we've all seen it, the daunting pictures of the cone of uncertainty, usually with a spinning, scary hurricane symbol. The spaghetti models that are going all over the place. Nobody really knows where it's going to go or what it's going to look like when it gets here. In fact, just this week they forecasted 2 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico at the same time. They've been tracking hurricanes since 1900 and there's no record of that ever happening before. Well, not even the experts know where the storms are truly going, but whether you are buying or selling a home, a condo, or a townhome, we definitely know how to protect you, your money, and your home. Just one of the great things about listing your home for sale with Janet Berry's luxury home team is the incredible detailed HD photos and the HD videos that are included with our marketing package. Also included our incredible drone footage. And not only do they really highlight your property, it just so happens that the insurance companies seem to love our photos and videos also when you're trying to prove how your home looked prior to a hurricane. We had a seller who was fighting with their insurance company, and he was pretty thankful that we had incredibly detailed drone footage of their roof, and you could clearly see its condition. So let's talk about buying a home in Southwest Florida for a minute. I'm going to walk you through the actual sales contract in detail. In September of 2017, Hurricane Irma came through Naples and Collier County, and at that time our standard real estate contract looked quite a bit different than it does today. Before, during, and after Irma, it was actually fairly easy to successfully argue for buyers or for sellers, depending on who you were representing, because there were so many loopholes in the contract at that time. Thankfully, our contracts have tightened up quite a bit since then, and I'm going to show you in the actual sales contract so you can see how to stay protected. The most common question I get is, if we are under contract, either buying or selling our home here in Southwest Florida, and a hurricane comes through and damages the property prior to closing, who's responsible for it? And that used to be a pretty difficult question to answer with a lot of variables that were part of the answer, but now the answer is quite simple. The seller is responsible for the property. So if we look on the sales contract, this is our standard Naples Area Board of Realtors contract, and starting on the bottom of page 6 is standard D2C, which is the seller's maintenance obligation. And it says that the seller is responsible for maintaining the property in the same condition from the date that everybody signed the contract, which is the effective date, all the way through the closing date, or through the date of possession, whichever is earlier, with the exception of normal wear and tear, and also with the exception of any repairs or modifications that the seller has made to the property as the result of a prior inspection that the buyer requested changes to be made to the property. By the way, the reference to date of possession means that the buyer has moved into the property prior to the closing date, which I do not ever recommend under any circumstances. I never recommend moving in until the property is closed and until the property belongs to you. Moving along to item E, standard D2E, item number 1 is risk of loss. So this is going to talk about what happens to insurance, and what happens, who bears the risk of loss. So any loss or damage to the property that's caused by a hurricane between the date the contract is signed, which is the effective date, and the closing date shall be at the seller's sole risk and expense. They own the property, and between the effective date and the closing date, they're responsible for it, and it's their sole risk and expense. And extremely important, the seller shall maintain all existing casualty, wind, hurricane, and flood insurance until the property sale is closed. Moving on to standard D2E, item 2, availability of insurance and services that are essential for closing, states if the buyer is unable to obtain hazard, flood, wind, or homeowner's insurance because of the hurricane, or if they're unable to obtain such insurance at a reasonable rate, and or if the services essential for closing are not available by the closing date as a result of the hurricane, the buyer can delay the closing date until a date that's up to 5 days after coverage becomes available and services essential for closing are restored. So what are examples of essential services? That might include electricity that you need to close, maybe internet access, phone service, etc. Things that you need, services that you need to actually close the property. If said coverage is not available and or the essential services are not restored for a period of 30 continuous days after the date of the hurricane, either the seller or buyer may terminate this contract not later than 35 days after the casualty date. Item number 3, standard D2E, item 3. If the property is rendered either uninsurable or unfit to live in, if any such casualty, loss, or damage renders the property on the closing date either uninsurable or unfit for habitation, then either buyer or seller may terminate the contract not later than 5 days after receipt of documentation telling them that it's either uninsurable or not unfit for habitation. Standards D2E item 4 has to do with the landscaping. If any loss or damage to the landscaping is caused by a hurricane, the seller's financial obligation for restoration of the landscaping to the way it was on the effective date shall not exceed 1% of the purchase price. And finally, item number 5, D2E item number 5 is the right to an additional post-casualty inspection. So within 5 days after the seller has notified the buyer that it's safe to come on the property and that everything's available, then the buyer may conduct an inspection of the property for the purpose of identifying any loss or damage to the property or to personal property or systems and equipment as a result of the hurricane. Seller obviously shall provide access and utilities to the greatest extent possible. So as long as utilities are available and access is easily and readily available, then the seller shall provide those for the purposes of that inspection. So between the sales contract, the hurricane-related tips and tricks that we've learned in our experience, and our detailed photos and videos, we will easily protect you in the event of a hurricane, whether you're buying or selling a home or both in Southwest Florida. If you have any questions about protecting yourself when you're buying or selling a home in Naples or Southwest Florida with or without a hurricane, please feel free to text or call Janet Berry. Her phone number is 239-450-1892, and you can always search all the homes for sale in Naples on one of the top Naples home search sites, which is www.janetberry.com. I thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you soon.